I don't know whether you've heard, but I'm offering some spaces in my calendar for Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Calls. I've had over 30 people book since last Monday. So if you want one of the last remaining spots, go and grab a space now. Go to fabfertile.com, that's FABFERTILE.com, and click on Book a Free Call.
So because people are confused and sometimes even providers are confused, the information is a little obsolete. And so sometimes 2 of the 4 markers are elevated and 2 are not. And that is confusing because it's hard to tell if it's chronic or if it's just past.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Clark, and my mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. Most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming Dr. Kasia Kines to the podcast, and we're digging into the Epstein Barr Virus and its link to fertility. Dr. Kasia Kines is a doctor of clinical nutrition, the CEO of Holistic Nutrition Naturally and EBV Educational Institute. She's a board-certified nutrition specialist, certified nutritionist licensed by the Washington State, with 2 master's degrees, including a master's in clinical nutrition from the prestigious Bastyr University. She is the author of the Amazon best-selling book, The Epstein Barr Virus Solution. Dr. Kines has been in clinical practice since 2005, providing individualized support to nearly 2,000 clients with complicated health issues, with EBV now being her main focus. Her virtual practice serves clients nationally and globally. Her book is available on Amazon, Epstein Barr Virus Solution. Check out her website at kasiakines.com, KASIAKINES.com. And before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this to make sure you never miss an episode. Hey, Dr. Kasia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for coming on. Excited to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So I find that most people have their own story as how they came to this work in this field. So can you elaborate on your story and your journey of where you are today?
Sure. Well, many clinicians, especially in functional medicine, I think you probably have heard stories of being healers that were wounded, starting their career because they were, I was just always interested in natural medicine, almost became a naturopathic doctor, but decided to do nutrition instead, and just always believe in joy, in people's rights to be well, not just healthy, but well and thriving and following their dreams and passions. And so that's the kind of work I've been doing, except over the years, people came more and more complicated to the point where my cases were typically almost always complicated. And at some point, and some people in functional medicine experience, you hit the wall when you work. People come so sick that sometimes you can't help them, but sometimes there's something behind that you can't crack. You hit the wall, and it's very frustrating because you know there's something you don't know. If you only knew what you were missing, you would help that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of where I found myself, and I asked that question, and there were a lot of circumstances that led me to this path with Epstein Barr. Just like before, I was led to work with more Hashimoto's and thyroid, and this is a huge female issue.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something behind it too, and like, what was that? And that's Epstein Barr virus. So I think when you ask, you receive, and I had been asking this question also because of my frustration with my personal loss of a very dear friend to multiple sclerosis.
Mm.
As much as I was trying to help her, she was in Poland, I was already in the States, and as I was building my life here as an immigrant in the States, she was actually fighting over the years, and I think we lost her after 19 years, what was it? 1996 was when she was actually diagnosed, just before I was leaving for the States. And I was so frustrated because over the years I watched her deteriorate as she was fighting, and And I was already a nutritionist at that point when she was sick, and I was still not able to figure it out. And now I was asking, and I was asking, and then we lost her, and it was so tragic and really, really hard. And so I think somehow I stumbled upon the right information, the right trainings, the right people, the right books, and here's where I am.
Yeah.
Too late for her, but we can save other lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And so I guess in your area of expertise here is Epstein Barr virus, and really I've heard about it more recently. I saw on your site there you mentioned the medical medium Anthony Williams.
Right.
Which I've read all his books, and he's amazing. I love him.
Yeah. Who hasn't?
Well, some people haven't. I gave my mom the book on thyroid for her to read. So, but yeah, that was his last one. But really, for someone with dealing with infertility, why is looking at the Epstein Barr virus? Why is that important?
I was thinking about that question because you asked me that question to answer before, and I think the biggest thing probably will be thyroid. Mm-hmm. And impacting it. So if the virus actually moves into the thyroid tissue and you develop Hashimoto's and you develop inability for normal hormone function, thyroid is so important for fertility. That might be probably the most clear-cut connection. Mm-hmm. I recently had a case when there was a history of acute hepatitis caused by stress, high stress, circumstantials in life, young woman, developed problems. She had problems with fertility also, developed a possibility of initial stage of multiple sclerosis. She was being watched. Mm. And as a result of working together, we straightened up everything. We provided the right nutrients. We cleaned up. We did the ABV protocols, and she was on a 4-month program with me. And they were hoping for second baby, but they were not ready. And there popped the pregnancy right there during the program. Oh, and wow. Now she has a healthy second baby. So there's, these things are so intricate. I was thinking that the only connection like black and white is the thyroid. But I was really surprised because when I looked at it a little bit closer, there is EBV is a herpes family virus. And there was a study about 2 years ago or so on another herpes, HHV6, showing that in about 43% of women with unexplained infertility, this virus was found in the lining of their uterus. And it was not found in the lining of the uterus of the fertile woman. It was an interesting study. So, there's so many reasons why it's so much harder to conceive for both women and men. And you probably covered all of these areas. But this is even for me, this is unexpected. I'm looking at the study right now and say, there's more viral infections behind than we actually know about.
Yeah, because we have people coming with unexplained, and they have multiple parasites and other gut infections, and to me that's
there you go.
That's not unexplained.
No, it's typically unexplained so far, but there's always a reason. Yes, exactly.
And so, reading from your site here, so 95% of the global population carries the antibodies for EPV, so Epstein Barr virus.
Right.
Which is that's a little shocking that it was that high, actually.
Right. I think the research community is looking into creating a global vaccination. That's how they're looking at it. Mm-hmm. I think we evolved with the virus. I mean, it's been here for 1 million of years, longer than we have. But I think I agree with Anthony William, the medical medium, and I do want to credit him for his books because that's how I started my journey. Without his book, reading it, I probably wouldn't have just this door opened for me and I just plunge in, and I credit him completely. But anyway, he's saying that the toxicity is different. The Industrial Revolution, the heavy metal exposure in the environment, all that has triggered something in the virus. It's mutated. That's what he's saying. And so what I see is that the toxicity, like you probably talk to your viewers a lot about toxicity and fertility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems that the virus feeds, and maybe other viruses as well, it seems that this virus feeds on heavy metals or has affinity to heavy metals. And when I looked at research to back it up, I found Dr. Jeska from 2004, who was a study when she compiled different research suggesting that viruses have affinity towards mercury in particular. We have a lot of mercury in the air. We have mercury from fish, from seafood. So the aspect of toxicity and Epstein Barr is a possibility, and toxicity with fertility is a huge, huge factor, right?
Yeah, and what about with those amalgam fillings?
Amalgam fillings, if you can have them removed, please do so. But there are some times where people are too compromised and too ill, and that can be a tipping point if they are not removed properly. You only want to work with a biological dentist. You don't want to remove all of them at the same time. You want to have a dentist that actually has a protocol, like a high antioxidant detox protocol before and after, because the whole procedure is risky, because when you take it out, you create vapors. It's not the solid mercury that is toxic, it's the vapors from the mercury that are highly toxic and completely absorbable through the oral cavity. That's the problem. So you don't do it lightly, because it can make you very sick, sometimes seriously sick, sometimes chronically, if that exposure is very high, if the dentist just removes it without precautions. It has to be a biological dentist who specializes in it and knows how to do it safely. And then, yes, definitely get these removed. The mercury is very toxic.
Yeah, I talked to someone the other day, and she had hers removed, but she just had such a negative reaction to it, just extreme anxiety and very, a really hard time with it.
Yeah, you have to be very, very careful and do it slowly and have all the backup, all the nutrients, antioxidants, has to be vacuum. There needs to be technology used that vacuums all the air, so to minimize exposure. Mm-hmm.
And so with Epstein Barr, how do we test for it? Because there's potentially some false negatives if your immune system is low. How do we get a reliable test for it? What's your recommendation?
Right. I would do 4 markers. There's a big chapter I created on ebvhelp.com website. So because people are confused, and sometimes even providers are confused, the information is a little obsolete. And so sometimes 2 of the 4 markers are elevated and 2 are not. And that is confusing, because it's hard to tell if it's chronic or if it's just past. The problem is that if you have chronic EBV, but you only had infection and you're doing well, your immune system is well, you don't have any conditions, you don't have autoimmunity, you don't have inflamed brain, you don't have cancer, you're living your life, then even though those 2 markers are still elevated, they probably will be for the rest of your life. And it doesn't mean that EBV is driving any medical conditions. But for people who have chronic conditions and are not responding, they have Hashimoto's and they have lupus and maybe Sjogren's and maybe they have stem 1. And if you start piling up the list of complaints and autoimmune disorders, maybe there's history of cancer, especially stomach cancer, maybe, then you have to look those 2 positive markers and say, well, you've had exposure there for the rest of your life, but there is a possibility that actually undercurrent, that virus has been driving certain illnesses. And so there's other markers, the other 2, And one of them is typically not elevated because it will come up only when you have the first initial infection. But there's this one marker called early antigen, EA, and that's the most important one that nobody should miss. But that comes back positive only during current reactivation. Oh. So I would advise, if people are confused and maybe even have done the labs, and sure enough, 2 are positive, 2 are negative, and VCA, IgG, EBNA, IgG, these are typically elevated. So it may mean just the past exposure, it may mean chronic condition, right? We don't know that there's anything, if it's undercurrent or if it's just past, depends on the person. But if that early antigen is caught in time and it's elevated, it elevates towards the end of the initial infection, but it flares up whenever people reactivate. So that is kind of a more predictable marker for whether you have active infection right now or not. So you have to catch it. So I would say if people have flare-ups, just like with thyroid flare-ups, when they feel better, they feel worse. So when they start feeling worse, when anybody starts feeling like the truck ran you over, that's when you want to run to the lab and test EBV, including early antigen. Because if you find that that's elevated, then you know that that's part of your problem. But if it's not elevated, then like you said, some people have compromised immune system. So what do you do with that, right? You're not going to have the right results. You're going to have false results.
And so do you need to ask for those 4 markers then, or how do you go about going in to make sure that it's done properly? So
anytime I would do the testing, I would do all 4 markers just to have a complete picture, and always retest the same things, especially the chronic conditions. So that would be VCA IgM, VCA IgG, early antigen IgG, and EBNA IgG. These are the common ones. This is typically what the panels will include. So yes, and I think you were asking me a question in email previously. Well, what happens if your immune system is not working? Mm-hmm. Then you may have false negative results because your immune system is not picking up or making those antibodies, so you don't show. And that's a very good question. And so in that case, if you're working with a clinician already or a doctor, you can ask them, can you please do a blood work, just a blood test, very simple, and test my total immunoglobulins, IgG and IgM. Because these are the IgGs and IgMs are tested for in the panel for Epstein Barr. And if they come within the range, then you know, it's negative, it's positive, it is whatever the tests showed. But if they are below the range, then one of my colleagues, Dr. Engelman, likes to take the calculator, and I do that too, and recalculate what it should be based on normal range. So kind of recalculating the lab results and see if they would be positive. So it sounds a little complicated. I know if it's the first time a person hears that, but there's different scenarios when certain people do not make certain antibodies, or they may be false positive and things like that. So as much as I could find in medical literature, I put different scenarios of results on that website, EBV Help. There's a button for labs and diagnosis or something like that. There is a button. And so I have different scenarios. So if anybody already has done the test, they can click there and look and see.
So EBV Help, and then under lab.
Yes, HELP.
Okay. Mm-mm. Awesome. Mm-hmm. And then, so when we think of Epstein Barr virus, I know at least when I think of it, I was thinking of mono, which, you know, usually only lasts 6 weeks. You think of it as teenagers. I know my friend had it when we were in high school. But then, so once you have mono, does that mean potentially it could become chronic later? Do you have to have mono?
Well, this is a very interesting question. Typically, people have mono. Many people don't remember because it could have been just bad flu, and you've had many of those, and one was just a little worse, and you wouldn't even think about it. For some people, it's really debilitating, and it's 6 months or 4 months or 6 weeks, and sometimes people are bedridden. I don't know how bad it was for your friend.
Yeah, she was probably 6 weeks. I remember she just was in the house and
At
we were all
home.
staying away from her,
Yeah,
and yeah, she just
yeah,
dying.
exactly. She was just dying. Well, for some people, it doesn't quite turn off. That's the problem. Some people don't have mono or don't remember mono because you can contract it anytime in your lifetime, even through umbilical cord. So we're probably, we live with it, most of us. So 95%, 95% of global population carries this virus. So it's very hard not to have it. It's a kissing disease. You can't live in a bubble. So that's not the point. So for some people that mono doesn't really present, or it was so slight they don't remember. Sometimes first infection is in infancy, and that's also mild, and it goes unnoticed. It's in infancy, it may not be anything serious at all, a little sniffle or something like that. It depends. So some of my patients say they don't remember having mono, but yet they have chronic illnesses, complications, autoimmune conditions, and as soon as we address the EBV, suddenly, if that's what it is, if that's what drives it, suddenly the long-term depression shifts, the Hashimoto's antibodies go to normal, the Sjorgen starts responding by a person starts producing more saliva, first time in 15 years. Maybe it's not that simple because, as a nutritionist, I do all kinds of work together with EBV. We always work with the whole person, and EBV is always in the context. It's not just like, oh, there's just EBV, on and off, check and done. There's a human factor, so there's always context. But yeah, for some people that mono doesn't quite go away, and sometimes it lingers, and sometimes after the mono, people are not quite the same. And then depending on what happens after, maybe somebody needed to be on steroids and completely suppress the immune system for any reason, unrelated. And then suddenly the virus goes, explodes, and they get severely sick. So, like I said, circumstances. So sometimes there's a term called chronic mono syndrome. It's a medical term for those situations when that mono wasn't really the end of it. But for many people, mono was the end of it. And then there's another scenario. Let's say you had mono, like your friend had mono during teenage years. And if the life goes on over the course of next 10, 20, 30 years, and everything is fine, the person will never get sick. But if suddenly there is a lot of pressure on the job, maybe it's a night shift, maybe there's a divorce, maybe there's some personal tragedy and losses and grief, and too many changes, moving, losing harm, and things pile up. I've seen this situation, perfect storms, when there's a pile up of circumstances, when the person just cannot, the stress level just tips over, and the person just gets severely ill, incapacitated. And then they have a complete flare-up of EBV, and nobody knows where it's coming from. But the virus has been there for many years. It's just a matter of circumstances when it can reactivate. So it can be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, never, or every 5 months. It just depends. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's the way with when autoimmune disease, I sort of asked the question, what happened before you were diagnosed? Like, what was going on? Sometimes it's death in the family, a change of a job, a divorce, those emotional stressors. Yeah, obviously
traumas.
Traumas. Obviously, the environmental, toxins are huge, and gut infections, but also, just those situational life things.
Yeah, situational life things. And the environmental toxins, let me tell you a story, because for your listeners that may be relevant. And I just discovered and made the connection last summer, and I started to communicate that anywhere I could. And the response I got was so overwhelmingly confirming. One of the most dangerous chemicals created by humans, but also created by nature, is dioxins. And dioxins can be created by burning forests, for example. And so there are studies to show that it reactivates Epstein Barr. So I remember in summer when we couldn't see, last summer, when we couldn't see through the sky, it was so bad. I started to post, for the EBV community and my community, like, make sure you don't breathe this air because you're going to reactivate Epstein Barr. And then it dawned on me, I did more research, that fireworks also do the same. They have dioxins and they linger in the air. And so around July 4th, I was telling everybody, stay away if you're sick, if you have chronic EBV, if you've had it, stay away from watching it outdoors. Yeah. Stay in. And then people were starting to email me, text me. They live in British Columbia. They live in Washington State when there were forests burning. And people were saying, no wonder I am so sick again, and I didn't know where it was coming from. So it's such an opportunist. And so just knowing this can save another reactivation, so circumstances, just like you said.
Yeah. Are you, I guess you're recommending like a mask or a respirator if that kind of stuff's going on, I'm assuming, or staying inside?
Whatever you have, yes. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, antiviral supplements to just stop the replication and stop the damage. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then what about the link between SIBO and Epstein-Barr?
That's another very good question. So you have a great community, very educated listeners. Well, there's not a single study yet. Maybe we should do research and publish and see what we find. There's not a single study connected them directly. However, there is a hypothesis on vagus nerve and fibromyalgia / chronic fatigue and viral infections, especially EBV. There was a researcher in Belgium, if I remember, a few years ago, pointing to the fact that, which is true, pathogens can impact vagus nerve. And we look at SIBO as motility disorder, right? So motility disorder means that your innervation is not allowing the food to move through the gut in a timely fashion. The longer the food sits in the gut when it shouldn't, the more fermentation, the more SIBO. But also, a SIBO is caused by valves opening or closing at the wrong times. So you have perfectly normal microbials from the colon migrating to small intestine, which is completely the wrong place for them to be. Mm-hmm. So you have that infection. So it's something about that motility, innervation, wrong signaling. What is affecting the valve? Why is the valve not closing? So it's a little bit complicated. It could have many other causes. But with SIBO, we look at vagus nerve a lot, right? There's a lot of research on vagus nerve. Clinicians are working with vagus nerves. I've worked sometimes with vagus nerve exercises of gargling and gagging and singing, trying to reactivate that vagus nerve, or doing acupuncture with electric stimulation to wake it up a little bit. The hypothesis that connects SIBO and EBV is that sometimes EBV goes into thyroid, sometimes liver, sometimes joints and muscle. I'm working with a patient with a connective tissue disorder right now, and of all the things she's done, the antiviral work we've done turned her around and nothing else did. So we know it's driven by viruses, and we pretty much know it was Epstein Barr based on labs. And so it could also go into your vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the biggest nerve. It starts at the base of your brain and goes through the esophagus, innervates your throat, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine. So it wanders. It's called a wandering nerve because it's so big. So imagine that you have a virus that can actually impact that nerve. So his hypothesis is that once that happens, people can develop problems with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and pain receptors. So you can stretch that hypothesis and say, well, if it affects vagus nerve, then the motility would be affected.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting, right? So it's, mm-hmm. And I guess with the thyroid piece, so do you think, what percentage of the time is Epstein-Barr present with thyroid dysfunction?
Well, what we know in research is that We do know that there's epidemic of hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
So
All the time.
all the time. Pretty much, any female comes your way, you want to test. But we also see in research that up to 95% of hypothyroidism is actually not just low thyroid function, it's actually Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It's a different ballgame because that's autoimmune.
Mm-hmm.
So autoimmune means that the immune system is attacking something in the thyroid. So the common misconception is that autoimmunity means that the body is attacking itself. But in case of infections, if you have the virus in the tissue of thyroid, which is not uncommon, the immune cells will go after the cells in the thyroid in order to try to kill the virus that infected them, right? There's no other way. So it's going to be killing the cells, right? Along with the virus. And so you have less tissue, less thyroid, and your function goes down. So if 95% of hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's, then every doctor should really add the 2 antibodies to the panel when they test and retest thyroid, and it's not being done. It's getting better, but it's still not routinely done. My professional belief is that it should be just part of the thyroid panel, always.
Are you struggling to have your baby? First of all, know that my heart goes out to you. I struggled with infertility just like you. So I want you to answer a question for me. Do you want to improve your chances of having a healthy baby? So if the answer is yes, then I'd love to help you, and I'd like to help you do it for free. So go to FabFertile, FabFertile.com and click on book a free call. So here's how it works. Right at this very second, you're probably stuck on one of these 3 things. So first of all, you're dealing with stress and constant worry. You're up late at night, scouring the internet for answers, leaving feeling even more worried and overwhelmed. Sometimes you find yourself worrying all day long, day after day, and the underlying fear is that you'll never be a mother. Number 2, you're trying to eat healthy, stick to an exercise plan, take all the right supplements, get a great sleep, but life just keeps getting in the way. You have good intentions every week, but then you get busy and tired. And the last thing you want to do is focus on your health. You worry that you'll never stay on track. And number 3, you're preparing for your next transfer. The IUI or IVF is coming up so fast. You can feel yourself overanalyzing everything. You know you shouldn't be stressed, but thinking about being less stressed just stresses you out even more. You don't know which diet, supplements, or exercise routine will optimize your chances. You're confused and worried that this is your last chance to be a mother. So which of those sounds most like you? The good news is that whichever it is, I can help you craft a plan to enhance your chances of conception for free. I'd love to spend some time with you. So here's what to do next. Just head on over to FabFertile, FabFertile.com and apply. It's a really short application that just tells me about your health, how long you've been trying to conceive, and how soon you'd like to be pregnant. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend the 30 most valuable minutes on your fertility ever. So go to FabFertile, FabFertile.com and click on book a free call. Yeah, we ask our couples that are our program to get the full panel, and a lot of the times their primary care physician won't even run it.
No.
Which is
yes, our doctor didn't want to run it for me and my husband, so I had to pay out of pocket go around. Mm-hmm. That's exactly the problem. So if 95% is caused by autoimmune reaction, then what are the autoimmune triggers? If you look at them, it could be gluten, it could be infective agents, it could be Yersinia, it could be H. pylori. I think H. pylori is really big. But EBV is probably the biggest factor. So I would say if there's Hashimoto's, I would first look for EBV. I would then look for H. pylori. Sometimes it's both of them, but oftentimes these are the big ones. But I think EBV is the bigger one of the 2. So that's what I would always check.
Yeah, to check the EBV. Yeah, because I know I just interviewed Dr. Tom O'Brien today on, we were talking about gluten. So we went deep into the world of that, and basically saying that when a couple is trying to conceive, that both couples, male, female, should both go gluten-free. And the number of people that I see and talk to on a regular basis that have Hashimoto's, or it's actually their unexplained infertility, then we dig further and they actually have Hashimoto's, is a lot.
Yes, definitely. And I had a conversation with Dr. O'Brien because I was telling him when I was doing research on the book, I found I found a study initially on celiacs who are not doing well versus celiacs that were doing well. So these are people that were on gluten-free diet already, both groups. And they found that the incidence of positive EBV in that group, in the group that was not doing well, was about 70% versus I think it was 13 in the group that was doing okay. But then there was a study earlier this year, just a few months ago, that looked at specific DNA areas in the human body for autoimmunity and looking at particular protein, EBNA2, I think it was, that was able to actually affect these areas and trigger autoimmunity in 7 conditions: rheumatoid arthritis, idiopathic juvenile arthritis, multiple sclerosis, diabetes type 1, ulcerative colitis, but I think lupus. I don't know if I have these wrong, right? I think I do have these right. But the number 7 on the list was celiac.
Oh.
Yes, that's very unexpected. And I was blown away because that's another connection between, the gluten and Hashimoto's have a very strong connection. So if you have Hashimoto's, absolutely, gluten is up. But now celiac and EBV, that's a different story. If you truly have celiac, it could have been triggered by EBV alone.
Yeah, and we have people so go ahead.
Yeah, that's just hard for me still to comprehend because that's a big deal.
That it's behind all these different autoimmune diseases which are running rampant in our society. Yeah, we have people go on the autoimmune paleo protocol there for autoimmune, which can be a little difficult. Well, a lot difficult in the beginning. We have them do the food sensitivity test, then elimination diet, and then a little further down, if they want to do AIP first, they can start with that.
Let me ask you a question about that food sensitivity test. What kind of testing are you using? IgG, IgA?
We use a LEAP MRT, and then depending on where they are, sometimes they can't get the LEAP MRT. Then we'd use the IgG, but we prefer the LEAP MRT. Okay,
so Dr. Vojdani did a study on food antigens and EBV, and he found consistently only with IgG reactivities, there were foods that flared up positive false because of EBV, but people were actually not reactive to them. There's a whole list, yes, for all 3 antibodies, depending which antibodies they had positive. That's in my book. We created a table with those foods so people can look at them. It's easier. So if anybody is doing an IgG panel and they're a little bit surprised by all the foods that are coming up, you can go to PubMed and type in Dr. Vojdani.
Can you spell that for us?
Vojdani, let me see. And all the study is in my book, and we also, created a table. Vojdani, Vojdani, Aristo, Aristo. One of his studies, it will be, I don't remember the title, but it's profound because when the challenge is when you go into paleo or autoimmune paleo, it's very restrictive. When you do an IgG test, if you have EBV underlying and you flare up with all these foods, you're going to restrict even more. It's not sustainable and it's not necessary. So it's something that list would be really handy to have.
Okay, yeah, that's a good reference. Okay, so Dr. Vojdani.
Vojdani. Vagina, yes, I know.
There you go.
Vojdani, Dr. Vojdani.
Oh my goodness.
My
the female reproductive system for me. Okay, so that's a lot on EBV. So how do we begin to heal from this? If we discover we have it, what are some of your recommendations? I know that's a huge thing, and it's probably individual, but
yeah, it is individual. But if you look at research, there are specific markers that create more inflammation, more oxidation, and that is the fuel for the virus specifically. So it thrives if we have a lot of oxidation. So let's say oxidation could be increased drastically in marathon runners or people that are really aggressively overtraining.
Mhm.
The body naturally makes oxidative stress, so you have to have so many more antioxidants to combat that if you're an aggressive athlete. And so let's say that you are under a lot of stress, you're overworked, and you're doing marathon running and training and, the collage of circumstances. And then maybe you're running in the air when there's forest burning,
Mhm.
in the next state, and there's a drift. And suddenly you get really sick and you don't know what it is. So just being smart and aware of oxidative stress. Oxidation increases with toxic exposure, obviously, and also oxidation is part of life, and that's why we eat foods that have antioxidants. That's how humans have combated oxidative stress, right? It's just a fact of life. And antioxidants are in fruits, vegetables. That's probably the highest groups. So one of the things that I see in this country, and it's been getting worse in the last 2-3 years, as heavy restriction of fruits and creating, I really think we have fruitophobia right now.
Because of the sugars. I know, the whole anti-candida thing where it's like, wait, let's give up all the good fruit, which I did. I did that.
I hope it helped you, but it's not sustainable.
No, it didn't really help me.
Well, the candida is a resident, and you can't kill it off. But if candida is persistent, it may be persistent because of heavy metals like mercury. We're just seeing a little bit of anecdotal evidence on that. So it's all about terrain. We don't want to kill candida, we want to put it in its place. And something else caused it, not so much fruits. Fruits will never cause candida. Fruit is life. Fruit is the simplest, fruit is perfect food. And so when people are very compromised and the gut is damaged, yes, it's tricky. Some people can react to foods. When you have SIBO, there's certain fruits that ferment more, and that causes more bloating and gas and distension. So, of course, you want to pick the right fruits. But in a healthy individual, I literally have to take pictures of myself with a big bowl of fruit so people can see how much fruit you can eat at a time without getting sick, without getting diabetes, without getting sugar high. Mm-hmm. All these concepts are completely wrong. And so this is the biggest group that can provide antioxidant value, really, and is delicious and sweet. We like sweet. So it's easy. It's hydrating because it has high water content. It has natural sugar. It has fiber. It has colors. It has, it's pleasure. It gives people joy to eat fruit. So I think that's the easiest way to get your antioxidants, honestly, in diet. And of course, vegetables. But paleo autoimmune is based on vegetables. So I don't have to preach to the choir, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody knows about vegetables. So with EBV in particular, you want to protect the liver. I think Anthony is coming with the next book on liver.
Oh, is he? Oh, wow.
Yes, I think it's coming this fall. And it's very important because liver is really impacted by infections. And sometimes EBV flares up in the liver and people have hepatitis. I've seen that. And so liver and gallbladder, they're not very good with too much fat. And that's my concern with paleo autoimmune. Sometimes people get into too much fat, too much meat, and meat always will have the fat component. And that's hard on the liver and hard on the gallbladder. And the meat doesn't have as much of the antioxidant value, anti-inflammatory value. So for EBV, I noticed that you don't even have to be, depends on the person, knock on wood, of course, everybody's different, but yeah, sometimes I don't have to restrict and I don't have to go into any particular diet format. We expand the foods because people already are on the restrictive diets like autoimmune paleo. We expand it as we're working on the EBV, stopping the replication, supporting the immune system, and suddenly people can expand and start eating and enjoying different food groups. and have higher antioxidant value. And they tolerate it, they enjoy it, they don't feel deprived, and the research supports it. One of the biggest inflammatory markers associated with EBV is called NF-kappa B. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but if it's high, then you have a lot more inflammation, joint inflammation, inflammatory conditions. And you can increase NF-kappa B by 150% in your bloodstream within, I think, 1 or 1.5 hours of eating one junk meal in a junk restaurant, fast food restaurant.
Yep.
Pardon me. So that's been documented. And that's a feeding ground for EBV because it hijacks NF-kappa B. So you create more NF-kappa B, and it literally jumps on NF-kappa B, hijacks it, and runs on it. And that's how it increases its reactivation.
And it's really to stay away from those top allergens for EBV. Would you recommend like no gluten, dairy, corn, soy, like those kind of ones to stay away from that?
Probably, I would say soy, for me, it depends on the person. As long as the person doesn't have sensitivities and only picks organic and fermented soy like miso paste and making miso soup, that's actually very nourishing and healing. And if you're reactive, obviously you don't do it. The problem with soy is that most is contaminated, and we've had so much exposure to soy without knowing through food products. Yeah. We don't know that we're eating soy. So a person can say, I never eat soy. But if you were to test you probably would find remnants of exposure if you look at the food products that we eat. It's in cookies, it's in oils, it's in restaurants. That's what they cook with sometimes, But corn is very hard on the gut. Corn is very allergenic. Dairy is highly inflammatory, and yes, it doesn't serve you when you're trying to heal. And gluten is very problematic. I would add eggs to it.
Oh, right. Yeah. Eggs as well.
That's one of the foods that Anthony Williams was mentioning in his books. And I did look at research and found one study associating it with actually a real food allergy between having EBV infection and having allergy to eggs. So IgE is a real allergy that's more serious. It's not sensitivity like IgG. It's not delayed. It's clear cut, very straightforward, instant reaction. A little bit like IgE is a little bit like peanut allergy. When a kid has allergy to peanuts, it's very serious. You don't play with it, and it's instant. And I've seen people that were perfectly fine with eggs, and at a certain point in life, they develop sensitivities kind of coinciding with EBV infection. So this is how much we know, and this is how much I've seen so far. So that's enough for me to say, well, take a break. I always look at the egg history with the patient to see if it's a possible food to eliminate.
What about the streptococcus in eggs? I've read that too.
That's one of the complications, because I think a lot more people have strep and EBV than we know. And so when we start testing stool tests, I see strep in it, and I no longer think, oh, it's just, it's benign, it's part of the makeup. Strep can do a lot of damage. And when people have tonsil problems, for example, tonsils can be infected by strep or by EBV or by both. And unfortunately, there is something called in research, there's something called transactivation. And transactivation means that if you have Epstein Barr Virus infection, you can transactivate other species. So maybe strep will start activating, maybe herpes will start activating, and vice versa. When you have other infection like strep, it can reactivate Epstein Barr because of the way the B cells are infected. They can signal wrong, and so I'm not sure about the connection with strep and eggs, but eggs are not produced in a way they are meant to be by any stretch of imagination. There's also some indications that original vaccinations were made with some of the proteins from eggs or hens. So I don't know enough about that. I just signaled it a little bit in the book because that's what a little bit of research came out of it. It's a very gray area. It's a big topic in its own right. But eggs are highly allergenic, just like corn. Corn and eggs are highly allergenic foods on top of all this. So
yeah, I know that firsthand with my daughter. She's very allergic to eggs.
Yeah,
make her throw up.
Oh,
yeah, not fun. And so as far as supplements, anything that you kind of have your go-to ones to begin healing?
Yes, my go-to is selenium, lysine, NAC, Koresh, zinc, B12. I love, in terms of herbs, licorice is number one, but I also love olive leaf extract.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's fabulous for co-infections as well, like strep in particular, and candida. And it is effective. It really works. But all these are dependent on the dose. And so my book has all the dosages and counterindications and, the maximum dose and types of products and, what to avoid and how much is too much. It gets complicated. And so I don't want people to overdo supplements. Too much of the good thing is not always, actually can backfire. But depending on the weight, for example, with selenium, I go as high as 800 micrograms a day. It's one of the biggest hitters. It stalls the replication. So, with lysine, you can go high, but you just have to work with somebody. If you take just one capsule of any of these, it may not be enough for a chronic condition of this type. So I tend to be very aggressive and watch it with the patient and see how they respond and look at the research, make sure that these potencies are safe. So everything is listed in the book. And if people don't, if people have reactions to these nutrients at the high doses, then it either means that it's too much, you have to step down, or it means that we're barking at the wrong tree, and it may not be, everything that is happening may not be caused by EBV in particular. That's what I'm noticing. So there may be other things going on, maybe electromagnetic field, toxic molds, or if people don't respond to these supplements, they're taking them, but they're not feeling better. Again, either it's not EBV, or there's toxic molds, there's heavy metals, there's something masking it and not allowing things to get better. So there's something underlying.
Yeah, and so if someone is tested and they find they have the Epstein Barr virus, they're trying to conceive, and they've got potentially Hashimoto's or some other things going on, how long are you seeing, if someone comes back positive with that, for body to heal? I guess that's a huge question, but
how fast can a person heal is what you're asking?
Yeah, I guess you experienced a lady there that within 4 months was able to heal, but it's going to vary.
That particular patient, she was on a 4-month program. She got pregnant during the program without trying and without being aware that they could get, pregnant at that time. And that wasn't our purpose. We were just trying to set things up so she has a better chance of conceiving. But it surprised us all how fast it went. It really depends. I just can't say, because every person has circumstances and different environmental histories. And if there is Hashimoto's and it's not driven by Epstein Barr, you have to look up other pathogens. And how fast does one gut heal? One can take 1 year. It depends on how badly damaged it is, even by viruses. And one can take 2-3 months. I don't know. But if it's just the EBV and we set things right, things move pretty fast. And in that case of that patient, it was pretty fast. It was pretty straightforward.
And do you retest, or is there any benefit to doing that? Or how do you, is there any kind of marker, or it's just the patient is like, oh, I feel better now?
Some people really like to retest. I don't insist on it, because 2 of those 4 markers will probably still be elevated, and they will probably go down a little, but they will probably be tagged for life. I don't see that they go back to normal.
Okay.
And that's not necessarily what we're looking for. The early antigen is the one that, as I told you want to test it when you feel really bad. So any other time you test it, it's probably going to come normal. So it's expected. So for me, retesting, I don't retest too much. It costs people money. I don't think I'm going to change anything that I'm doing, because it's depending on how we tested and what we saw. It's not that necessary. People start recovering and living their lives, and the symptoms drop. What's more important is, for example, to retest Hashimoto's antibodies.
Right.
That's what I would do if this is what we're struggling with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's more relevant, because if that's dropping and we're focusing on EBV, we know that if we're actually supporting the thyroid by stalling the virus. That's exactly what we needed to do. So that's more relevant.
Okay.
But yeah, people like testing. They can test and retest. Absolutely. It doesn't hurt. It's about $100, $150 too, depending where you go.
Okay. Yeah.
So, mm-hmm.
And then, so as far as any resources you'd like to recommend, obviously your book will link to that as well. But anything that you like right now, or an app or a website you're enjoying?
For EBV or for fertility?
Both, if you have
resources. I don't really have specific resources. Yes, obviously the book has a lot of information, but some of the most relevant things from the book I did put on the EBV help diet.com. I have a whole list of autoimmune disorders and types of cancer and other inflammatory conditions related to the eyes or stomach, or what can be associated with or caused by the virus. I have that on that website. I have this whole chapter from the book on the labs and lab interpretation exactly. So
excellent. Yeah.
If people are listening today and they're going, oh my gosh, I have to write it down, I'll get confused. You don't have to. It's on that website page. You can look there and read, and you'll be just fine. You don't have to worry. It's over your head. I'm still building that website. I just lack time. So we need to put food recommendations there. That's not done yet. I do have links to supplement websites with my favorite supplements listed, so people can browse around and look. So that's the biggest resource that I have created for EBV so far. My older website with my name, kasiakines.com, has various resources, for example, for inspecting for molds or for water filtration, toxicity. There are a couple of articles, blogs on thyroid, on fluoride and thyroid, some articles, blogs or video blogs on SIBO, and I started to write blogs on EBV as well, as whenever I have some time. Okay. That old website has a lot of resources for people interested in health, and probably hundreds of different recipes. They're not autoimmune paleo, I have to warn. Not specifically. They're just whole foods, plant-based, good recipes with a lot of information about particular nutrients and their benefits.
Awesome. Great. So yeah, I'll link to those websites in the show notes. And you have a free gift for the listeners. Can you share what they'll get with that gift?
Oh, yes. That's very exciting. So first topic is gluten and being gluten-free and shopping. So I have a little 3-4 minute video that I created when I'm actually in a health food store and looking at different packaging and actually strategically explaining what to avoid and kind of how to read the labels. I hold some things, I show some labels to the viewer. So it's very practical, it's very quick. I find that it's very helpful because it can be overwhelming. And so you can just zoom and even like gluten-free pasta, what to pick and what to avoid. Mm-hmm. So that's one. And the other one is my favorite topic, how to create a healing kitchen in a 21st century kitchen that is driven by microwave.
Yeah.
How the microwave is affecting your white blood cells, your immune cells, how, what is research saying about breast milk being heated and how does it change molecularly. And not only are we changing the structure, the molecular structure, of meats or whatever, vegetables as well, if we heat them in microwave, but we also deplete nutrients. And some people rely on microwaving, and so that really will probably start lowering your nutritional status, which is a perfect storm for viral infection, for reinfection, reactivation. So I put together a wonderful PDF with lots of nice pictures and not so much text, so it's very easy to read. And I also have very simple tools about how to actually jump into that kitchen and strategize what to do without that microwave, and how to heat the water, and how to heat or saute, how to manage it without actually being overwhelmed and doing extra work. This is particularly important for people who have EBV or chronic illness because they don't have energy. And the concept of cooking the concept itself becomes an overwhelming mountain to climb, right? And a lot of people are just not capable. When you're very stressed, you're not capable of even thinking, oh my gosh, it's another thing to learn, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it has to be really, really simple. And it's practical tools that I've been teaching everybody for years, and I do myself. We don't use microwave in our house.
Yeah, we're the same. But actually our microwave, it died like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. It's still sitting there. I should probably get rid of it. But, when it died, because I was like, oh, I don't use it that much. Well, I realized how much I was using it. Reheat. I don't know what I was doing with it, but just, once, I guess every couple of times a day I was using it. And then,
oh my gosh,
then it was like, oh, now I use the stove. So it's amazing how that
it is amazing. Like you said, it is pervasive. It is common, but it's not normal. That's and right. Even you're so conscious of the health, and even you were doing it. Mm-hmm. I remember, it's a habit. I remember a dear friend of mine who is an amazing functional nurse practitioner, amazing work with Hashimoto's. She was making me tea in her home, and she literally was putting her cup into microwave, like just out of habit. She wasn't even thinking. Yeah. And I was like, wait, what you doing? She's like, what do you mean? I'm making you tea. I said, no. And she had this moment, yes. No, in a cup.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And there was this moment of recognition. Oh my gosh, this is what we're doing. This is what we're taught to do. We cook with a microwave, but it's not normal. So it's one of those things. If whatever chronic conditions you have, and if you are fighting infertility, this is one of the things to do, because like you said, even you were using it a few times a day. Mm-hmm. So a few times a day, you were changing the structure of the foods you were eating. So you were changing that. You were making it more difficult for the body to absorb the nutrients, but potentially you were creating chemicals that don't exist in nature. Yeah. And some of them are detrimental. Some of them look like carcinogens in research. It was very hard to compile research for this, very, very hard. But most of it is from different countries and not the States. And they span through the 80s, 90s, some old research. But it's in the book, and it's in that little gift. So the gift is for the readers, exactly, so they can take this, and instead of just reading in the book and getting depressed, they can grab this handout and say, okay, this is what I do.
And take action. Yeah. So they can go to ebvhelp.com/gift-for-readers. And then you just type in 55555 into the receipt area, and then you'll get your email with the 2 free gifts. So
exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Kasia. It's been really informative. I love this topic, and I just don't think it's even explored a lot. So it's good to kind of dig into an expert that's got a lot of really good information and studies to back it up. So I appreciate you coming on the show today.
You're so welcome. Spread the word. Let's get that message out. It's so good that you're doing it. I appreciate you having me here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey everyone, we're getting super booked up for our functional testing and couples coaching program and have very limited spots available. So we ship our functional test kits worldwide, and we use food sensitivity testing using blood. We look at hormone testing using urine. We use the Dutch test. We look at stool testing, looking at the DNA of your stool. We also do hair tissue mineral analysis. All of these tests are included in our couples coaching program. So there's only 4 spots available for January and February. So if you're looking to have your baby in 2019, especially if you are struggling with low AMH, POF, POI, or low ovarian reserve. Please click on the link in the show notes to book your free call. Talk soon. Thank you for listening to Get Pregnant Naturally. Seriously, it means the world to me that you're here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of upcoming episodes. And I love this quote by Dr. Mark Hyman, Medical Director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and Chairman of the Institute for Functional Medicine. Functional medicine is medicine by cause, not by symptom. Functional medicine practitioners don't in fact treat disease. We treat your body's ecosystem. We get rid of the bad stuff, put in the good stuff, and because your body is an intelligent system, it does the rest. Thanks for listening. Until next time.